Waiting for your speakers and covered is the log now. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, if you wish at this point, since the next part of the afternoon is a commemoration service, and it doesn't involve a prayer service, if the women would like to come and fill in some of the seats, you're more than welcome to move forward if you want to sit next to a spouse or a child or something. But if you're comfortable where you are, please. Be at ease. The rabbis are on that side, and the speakers are on this side. What's up? Thanks.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. It's my pleasure as the chairman of the 20th Sephardic Synagogue to welcome everyone to this special event in the memory of our dear ex-rabbi Yossi Hori, 40 years service to the synagogue, and a special welcome to the close family friends, Claudia, Natalie, in Israel. But we hope to be able to watch the recording of this event, and also some Yavin and Gabriel. Also, special welcome to Diane Toledano. Great to see that. Diane Mada, and the main guests. Organizing Jack. So I pass over to Ivana, Jack first, and then take over. Thank you again.
Welcome everyone. So today's event's gonna be a mixture of people speaking, and my late father actually recorded over many years both Yossi and Diane Toledano, who's here with us today, will speak. So we've got quite a collection of recordings, and I've picked recordings from different services, different like holy days. Hopefully it'll give a bit of flavour. Just how amazing rendering Yossi was. Yossi, you walk in, you think he is Spanish or Portuguese. He was neither. Tunisian. But no one mastered it better than him. Hopefully you will hear that over the course of the afternoon. Without further ado, I will call first on Yaniv to speak.
Yosef, Dayanim, Rabbanim, family and friends, and of course the very special community of Wembley Spanish and Portuguese. A big thank you to the Zilub family and everyone at Wembley for organising this very special event. I'm sure my father is with us listening very carefully to every word. King Solomon writes, Tov Shem Nishem Tov, V'yom HaMavet Miyom Hivaldo. A good name is better than good oil, and the day of death is better than the day of one's birth. Now, we often focus on the first part of this verse, where we understand the value of a good name is priceless. But the second half is quite confusing. Don't we learn life must be protected at all costs? Only in the rarest occasion is death preferred over life. One explanation is that only at the time of one's passing, one's accomplishments really be truly appreciated, and one's name is known and more meaningful than at birth. When a person is born, his name is perhaps just a label. True, we choose a name with hopes and desires of what that person will become, but that name rarely tells us anything specifically about that person. So my father's name, Yossi or Yosef, means to increase or enlarge. And with his very special voice and service to the synagogue, he truly expanded this whole community. For over 40 years, he was very much loved here. The heart and soul of the Beit Knesset, although he used to joke that he served longer than Moshe Rabbeinu did, serving Bnei Yisrael in the desert. And every year he kept on telling us, this year I'm going to retire. But he never did. He chose to continue. He devoted his life to this community, exemplified by the many hundreds of messages and calls and emails we received from all around the world, sharing heartwarming stories of how my father helped them in good as well as bad times. Others attributed their love of Judaism to the inspiration my father gave them. As you know, my father was very punctilious about being in synagogue on time, the Hebrew calendar, and pronunciation. He taught hundreds of bar mitzvah boys their parashiyot, and he knew instinctively which parashah belonged to which week. To this day, I still don't know how he did it. The story goes, when I was born, he didn't say it's a boy, he said it's Vayechi. He came over from Tunisia when he was about 17, not knowing a word of English. He slowly learned the language, obtained a degree in biblical studies, qualified as an accountant, and became a chazan here in Memphis. This tale of achievement from humble beginnings would not have been possible without the kindness of this community. From helping him purchase his first home, to sharing with my mum classic British cake recipes, which I'm especially very grateful for. I always remember him as a very hard-working person, constantly putting in 100% to whatever he was doing, whether it was helping us with homework, making our Purim costumes, or his several jobs. He was always very humble and never sought grand titles or praise. For example, in our house in Kenton, just down the road, there's a large framed photo displayed on the wall. In that photo, my father is shaking hands with Chief Rabbi Mervis, whispering something in his ear. Intrigued, one evening I asked him, what did you tell the Chief Rabbi that? Now, even though my dad was very knowledgeable in Tanakh and Bara, he'd seek truth and never honor. He hated praise, preferring humility. And in a room, put a very distinguished guest on that day, he decided I'd rather go up to the Chief Rabbi quietly, and just for the sake of sharing a Kiddush, Lishma, the Torah sake, rather than my own praise. I've got many very fond memories growing up here in this synagogue, from the choir and the beautiful melodic S&P tunes to Yom Kippur, where rather than me looking at the watch every 5 minutes to see when the bars would come out, I was watching Diamonds on the Dharma with my father closely, because I knew the second they embraced and hugged, that is when Yom Kippur really came out. And of course, my father begging everybody to stay for 5 more minutes to do our bit afterwards. My father related to me how when he was trained to be a chazan for the S&P, the choir master used to make all the chazanim line up, and used to bang their chest with a metal spoon, ensuring the vibrations originated on their stomachs rather than their throats. He thought this was very strange. He would always be remembered for his unique voice, as well as a good name, living on a good voice does too. And as we mentioned before, we're going to hear some of the recordings later. Sadly, he won't be able to teach his grandsons here today their parashiyot, but he taught me well enough to pass on the tunes, although probably not to his standard. As we just read in the parasha last week, spies were sent to check out the land. Sadly, just like Moshe, he too never got to look and check out the promised land, even though he was planning to make Aliyah imminently. But my mother, please God, will be making Aliyah very soon, living near my older sister. I wish her every happiness. My father was always calm, even in the face of adversity or distress, constantly being my voice of reason and logic throughout life's trials and tribulations. His famous mantra of, "We'll work out in the end, it will be okay," echoes in my mind still to this day. Both his family and community miss him, and it still feels very strange without him, especially being in this synagogue with so many familiar faces. All that is left to say is thank you for coming, thank you for welcoming him into the community more than 60 years ago, when we will always have a very special place in our hearts. Thank
So the first recording we're going to play is poignant, actually, firstly, it's last week's Haftarah. It was actually read by one of our younger members of our community. But also the same Haftarah is Shabbat Hanukkah, which, as we all know, Yossi passed away just before Hanukkah started. So. Hopefully a flavour. Again, as with all the recording, hopefully we'll make the whole thing available at some point. I'll now call on Brian Toledano.
Bishop Moray Rabotai, I think everything has been said by Yaniv. I'd just like to add that when I came back from Amsterdam, I was absolutely astonished. His death was absolutely unexpected, and I just couldn't believe it. And I would like also to say that we had a wonderful together, many times, wonderful relationship. He spent many years in our home every Shabbat, and he mastered the tunes of the SOP very, very quickly. His parasha was absolutely faultless. The tunes of Yom Kippur and every Shabbat was absolutely excellent. No one could say absolutely if I were to read the parasha, I could not read the parasha exactly like he has read it, with beautiful calming and flair and experience. He had a gift for grabbing quickly the tunes and the melodies of any song. And now he's obviously in Olam Haba. You know, my friends, there are times when we hear some people have climbed the Mount of Everest, the highest mountain in the world. And once they reach the summit, what happens? They come down, and that's it. David HaMelech is saying, Mi ya'aleh b'har Hashem. Who will ascend the mountain of the Lord? And to ascend the mountain of the Lord is also extremely high. You need to keep the kashrut, keep the Shabbat, keep the tefillin, keep many, many mitzvot. And once you have reached, Mi ya'aleh b'har Hashem, then you should say that. Umi yakun bilkom kodsho. It's not enough to climb. Climbing Har Hashem is just not enough. But umi yakun bilkom kodsho. Now you may ask, how do we reach this summit of Har Hashem? Which Yossi, in fact, is able to reach it. And the answer is very simple. Neki chapayim ubar leva. You need to have clean hands. By clean hands, we mean a person has to be sincere, has to be honest, has to be upright. And the moment your uprightness is absolutely as it should be, then you have reached the summit of Har Hashem. Ubar leva, and you need also to be of pure heart. Yossi had a pure heart. He has helped many people, many by mitzvah, and so on and so forth. May the Almighty God, without me elaborating, rest his soul in peace, and may the Almighty God comfort his wife, his daughter, Yaniv, and indeed all of us, because we will remember him for many, many years to come. Amen.
And now call on Reverend Leon Lucy.
It saddens me that we are here today without Yossi in person. Normally, on communal occasions, I would find myself sitting next to him and benefiting from his insightful comments on practically any subject. When Yossi retired from this Kahal Kadosh of the Spanish and Portuguese Wembley community, I could not believe my luck when he decided to come to us regularly. We were, after all, just a few minutes walk away. I, of course, invited him to take services, which he reluctantly accepted, having retired. However, whenever the need arose, he readily offered his services, and his help was hugely appreciated. Sometimes, like on Shabbatons, he would deliver shiur to the community, invariably rich and challenging in content while still fresh and interesting. We at the David Ishak Neve Shalom valued his services very much. On many occasions, we tried to compensate him financially, but to no avail. I often sought his advice on halakhic matters and otherwise, but unless something was very wrong, he would not interfere. His knowledge of Judaism was vast, ranging from Gemara, Halakha, Midrash, grammar, and modern literature. As I mentioned in the Shiva, whenever I read the Sefer, and Diane Toledano mentioned this, Yossi was amazing at reading the Sefer Torah practically faultlessly. I found myself preparing doubly carefully, knowing that no error would escape him. And when and if he corrected me, it was so subtle that it was hardly noticed. Yossi was an avid reader of an eclectic range of books and an ardent follower of past great rabbis like the Shelah Kadosh and contemporary ones like Rabbi Meir Mazuz, whose thoughts he occasionally and enthusiastically shared with me. Yossi was admired by teachers at the college for his, and when we were children in Tunisia, for his high intellect and for invariably taking his studies very seriously, whether it's Talmud, Hebrew grammar, literature, English, or maths. Yet he was humble and kind, and I remember on a few occasions in Tunisia where the rabbi was teaching us and his son was present. And if his son couldn't answer a question, then Yossi, who for sure knew the answer, when asked, would shake his head because the teacher would be even more vexed that his son did not know while another child knew the answer. Yossi was a remarkable man from an exceptional family in southern Tunisia. They were, without exception, very special. Their house was one of those that stood out for its charm and style. His father, Rabbi Chameis ben Zion Puri, was a great, well-known rabbi and author of many books. And Rechid Israel, I just saw it there, is Rechid Israel, commentary on the Torah is being used in this community. Yossi's mother, Sharina, whom I had the painful pleasure to meet a year ago, the first time in many, many years, was and is elegant and diplomatic. We reminisced about Yossi in the presence of Claudine and the family, both from London and from Israel. And I could see where Yossi got some of his qualities. Among her tears, there were words of great wisdom and consolation. In other circumstances, she would have been publicly acknowledged as the true example of Solomon's Eshtai, which she indeed was. Yossi inherited many of these qualities. A born leader, he took the initiative when it was necessary, following in the advice of Rabban Gamliel, and when there aren't people around, strive to be that person. In Montefiore College, his diplomacy and leadership skills were quickly recognized, and so he became a de facto head boy liaising with the college's trustees and management. With any issue which concerned us, composing letters of phenomenal level in language and analytical skills, pure poetry written in prose. I still miss Yossi very much. I still mourn him. This is not only because I was suddenly deprived of his support and friendship. It is also because he went before his time. Let me explain. We are told in Masechet Avot הוא היה אומר, בין 5 שנים למקרא, he used to say, that's Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema, he used to say, at 5, Jewish male child, at 5 years of age, study of Mikra, Torah, scripture. Ben 10 למשנה, at 10, study of Mishnah. Ben 13 למצוות, at 13, subject to the commandments. Ben 15 לתלמוד, at 15, study of Talmud. At 30, the peak of strength. At 40, wisdom. At 50, able to give counsel. At 60, maturity. And the story is told of a Hasid who came before the Devrei Yoel Satmar Rebbe and declared, Rabbi, I believe I deserve a Hati Mazal Tov today. The Rabbi said to him, why? He said, because it says in the Mishnah, at 60, we achieve maturity, and I'm actually today 60, so I've achieved maturity. The Rabbi shook his head and he said, the Mishnah is not speaking about you. Why not? Said the man. Because what comes before that are stages that unfortunately you never achieved. At 5 for Mikra, when did you ever could read Hebrew properly? At 10 Mishnah, when did you learn Mishnah? At 15 Gemara? But he also did more than that. He followed those early stages and more. I feel therefore he deserves the latter ones. Ben Shiv'im Laseva, at 70, fullness of years, which he did. Ben Shemonim Ladvora, at 80, the age of strength. He was so looking forward to an exciting retirement in Israel. We read yesterday in the parasha, Moshe Rabbeinu sent the 12 spies, and he says, check this, check that, bring some fruit. And then he says, Ayin yesh ba'etzem ayin. Is there a tree or not? What do you mean? He told us to bring fruit, so there must be trees. So Rashi explains, Etz is not at all about talking about trees. It's talking about a tree, an outstanding human being, some great tzaddik that we could actually lose the war because of that man. Well, Yossi was an Etz, a great Etz in our synagogue, and this one. And losing him, we lost a very, very important, outstanding man. I am, however, consoled by Rabbi Yaakov's words in Pirkei Avot, where he says, Yafa sha'a achat shel korat ruach ba'olam haba mikol chayei ha'olam hazeh. More precious is 1 hour of satisfaction and tranquility in the next world, in the world to come, than all of the life of this world. In the adapted words of Nehemiah, Zochra lo Elokim letovah. O God, remember all of his good deeds to his credit. Elevate his dear soul to the highest celestial spheres of Gan Eden to rest with Tzaddikim Hasidim. Console all of his dear ones, his mother, his wife, his children, brothers, sisters. Help his descendants carry on his and his ancestral holy legacy to become an eternal source of virtue and righteousness, and fitting and proud memorial to his dear Neshama. Tehi nishmatot she'ora b'tzor ha'chayim, may his soul be bound up in the road of life. Amen.
Second recording we're going to play actually took me all until last year I discovered it, was actually Yossi recorded it for me in 2007 and I hadn't realised. So, I mean, I do sometimes Rosh Hashanah and Shachrit, and obviously he recorded that for me. As I was converting it for the service to a more modern form, before pressing stop as I got to the recorder, it actually recorded a whole load of stuff from Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, like obviously never discovered until now. So the second recording is one of many Kaddish recorded, which we do here.
Kaddish
On next speech actually is former chairman of Tom Yossi Bani Sabah, who won't be with us today but has sent in a recording.
Claudine, Yaniv, Natalie, and Gabrielle, rabbis, Wembley family, friends. It's an honor for me to have been invited to speak on this memorable Wembley family occasion. Yossi passed away over a year ago, and I consider this afternoon to be a celebration of a life of service and a tribute to a member of our family, a very special member of our family. Yossi has left an indelible mark in many ways. Without a doubt, he was the voice. He was not Spanish nor Portuguese, but his knowledge of the SNP liturgy was profound. He stands with the likes of Reverend Avignon and Ben Roche as the transmitters of this unique liturgy. His Hebrew diction and exact pronunciation were exemplary. Indeed, this attribute has shaped the way many here have learned to read. It's no surprise, therefore, that in the course of this afternoon, the Wembley Committee have chosen to play recordings of his. For many of us, his voice has marked important occasions and family occasions. On a personal note, he trained both my sons Mark and Denny for their bar mitzvah, even though at the time we were a long way from London. They also insisted that he participates in all my children's wedding ceremony. Yossi was not a dazzling orator, and considering his knowledge, he never spoke down to his listener. His sermons were clear and his Torah precise. The fact that he was a reverend who also worked in the secular world meant that he was able to combine and bring together lofty ideas with day-to-day events. This ability gave much greater poignancy to his message. Yossi served Wembley for over 40 years. He arrived, I remember, as a young bachelor and quickly integrated the younger members, including myself. We all married roughly at the same time and became parents roughly at the same time. Yossi was a private person, unassuming. His personal qualities endeared him to us, indeed, to all that knew him. His legacy is tangible, and he will be remembered with love and admiration by us and by all that knew him. Yossi, thank you, and rest in peace.
Now call on former member of our community who then Yossi from his teenage years and current care of Lauderdale Road, Susan Kendall.
Friends here in Wembley. Robert and I were both teenagers at Lauderdale Road when we first met Yossi. He'd arrived from Tunisia at a very young age to study at the Montefiore College and was known from then on, as was Svi, as one of the college boys. Even when grown up, he'd always be referred to as a college boy. As a group, they would sit together in the synagogue and from time to time would regularly take parts of the service. Even from those very, very early days, it was always such a pleasure to listen to Yossi read the service. He became a chazan here in Wembley after Chalfon Ben Arosh moved to Bevis Marks, and services at that time were being held in the church hall in East Lane, long before this synagogue was even built. But looking around, I think a lot of us remember that place as well as this one. Over the years, he became a friend and would come and eat with us on Shabbat and Yom Tov before he and Claudine were married. I can still see him sitting in our lounge. I can picture it still, shortly before he flew back to Tunisia for his wedding. Whilst he was a chazan, before he was married, he used to stay regularly with a couple in Manor Drive in Wembley over Shabbat. But on the long summer days, he would often walk back to Jews College where he was studying. It's quite a walk from Wembley to Jews College. It wasn't in Hendon, it was near Baker Street at the time. And he would tell us that he would stop off at Willesden Library on the way to have a break. He'd read the newspapers, and then he'd carry on with his walk. He came to us sometimes, I'm sure he came to Dan Toledano as well. His very closest friends at the time were Eve and Philip Bloom, and he used to spend a lot of time with them in their home in the Avenue. Numerous bar mitzvah boys from here have learnt their portions from a Yossi tape, as well as many of the Chatanim over the years. How many haftarot must he have recorded for people? Too many to count, I think. I believe many of those tapes are still in circulation. They're probably now CDs, but they're still around. Our own son Jonathan, whose bar mitzvah portion is next week for Korah, also learnt his bar mitzvah from a Yossi tape. When speaking to our daughter Deborah for her memories of Yossi, they were all positive and happy. Once we'd all settled here in the new synagogue, the youngsters, our next generation, would often chat informally to Yossi on a Shabbat afternoon, and he would explain to them many aspects of Jewish life in a very approachable manner. She remembers him once explaining all about Marat Ayin and how you had to be seen to be doing the right thing. It came up because some of her friends had wanted to go and eat chips at McDonald's. It had just opened and the story was going round. Oh, but they cook their chips in different oils. So Yossi very patiently sat down and explained to them why that was not a possibility. She recalled that if he was asked a question, he would often raise his eyes up as if thinking or looking for inspiration. And she said to me, if I had a question to ask, he would be the one I'd go to. He was always willing to share his knowledge without judgment. No question was too small for us to ask him, and I felt comfortable asking him anything. Whilst he was studying for his GCEs and A-levels at Montefiore College, one of his teachers, now Professor Isaac Benboom, who remembers Yossi as one of his most gifted students in English language and literature, said to me he had a lively mind with a gift for understanding and discussing literature in a language which had been completely foreign to him. Isaac recalled being so proud whenever he came to Wembley when listening to Yossi delivering a sermon in this synagogue, giving a fresh perspective on the parashah. That Yossi's command of English was almost flawless. It was always a pleasure to listen to him, whether in Hebrew or English. Although we've been away from Wembley for many years now, I can still hear Yossi's voice in my head, especially on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, those services at which he excelled. Thank you, Yossi.
Susan reference on it, recording. Well, I can't play the whole 5 Holy Day services. I have selected a small few minutes of bits of it. So this is part 1 of a small part. So the next speaker call is former chair of our congregation, Dr. Hugh.
Diane, Robin, Kildine and family, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak this afternoon at Yossi's memorial service. It was a great privilege to have known Yossi, and I really appreciate being given the time to share some thoughts with you today. Much has already been said about Yossi, but something that hasn't been mentioned is that he was for a time the head teacher at Holland Park Hebrew classes, where Ben Nathan children attended. Lorraine, my sister-in-law, remembers all the children sitting together in the men's section of the synagogue and Yossi teaching her the Aleinu prayer. Now, some of you might find this very difficult to believe, but I'm told that Colin was a bit of a tearaway at the Hebrew classes, and he spent more time in Yossi's office than he did in the classroom. For some reason, one day my brother-in-law David decided to emulate his older brother. Yossi called David into his office and told him to concentrate more and not misbehave like his brother. David was so scared that he immediately stopped misbehaving and didn't try it again. I don't think scary is usually associated with Yossi, but there you go. One word more frequently associated with Yossi is kindness. Joanna says that when Yossi went to get married and flew to Tunisia, her father, who worked at Heathrow Airport at the time, took Yossi to the airport and helped him through security and special privileges. Yossi never forgot this and visited Joanna's father on a regular basis, particularly as he became older and found it more difficult to get around.
Lorraine also remarked that Yossi would always ask after her sons, as indeed he would always ask about my sons, Alex and Jeremy. Yossi was obviously hugely involved with the Wembley community as the Hazan for many years, and I was privileged to be asked to help organising a dinner to celebrate Yossi spending 40 years with the community. And I've noticed that some of the photos from that occasion have been shown this afternoon. It was really a really lovely evening with many present and former members of the community coming together to join in the party. I was very pleased that we were able to hold this event to honour Yossi, and we are so immensely grateful for his enormous contribution to the community over all those years. Yesterday's Parsha, as has been said, was Shalach Laha. I think that it's appropriate to mention here that Yossi was the most incredible laner, if lanes work. His laning was always 100% accurate and melodic and a joy to listen to. He once told my father-in-law Martin when he was visiting a synagogue and their reader did not turn up for some reason. Yossi said not to worry and laned for them off the cuff, which is really a really incredible and an outstanding skill to have. In Shalach Laha, in both the Parsha and the Haftarah, spies are sent out into the land of Israel and then report back. In the Parsha, Moses sends 12 spies into the land, but only 2 of them, Caleb and Joshua, come back with favourable reports. I know that Yossi would have definitely been siding with Caleb and Joshua, as he was very keen to visit Israel and to spend more time there after his retirement. It is indeed a great shame that he didn't have more time to do this. I think one of the biggest compliments I can pay Yossi today is to say that my son Alex, one of the younger members of the community, told me how inspired he was by Yossi and how he really wanted to be here today. But in a way, I think that Yossi would have been pleased with the reason that he can't be here because he's currently in Israel. Thank you.
Now, pull on Rabbi Dwight, Senior Rabbi Jackson.
Toledano, Kada, Rabbi Muzi, Rabbi Roger, Kal Kadosh. The Hachamim famously recognize that the great leaders in our history had a job that they did before they took on the mantle of their great leadership or their historic leadership. And that is that they were often shepherds. Especially with Moshe Rabbeinu, Hachamim pointed out the fact that he spent a great deal of time with sheep before he spoke to God. And that it was precisely his time with sheep that attracted God. It was because of the way that he treated his flock that Kadosh Baruch Hu called him to his holy mountain and spoke to him from a fiery bush. My first meeting with Rabbi Yossi was in this room. As I was coming into the community in 2013, before I had moved, the Ma'amad wanted to make sure that I visited everyone in the community and outside the community, and had a special trip that I took to Wembley, and I met with Yossi right in this room at the desk over here. I remember it very clearly. The first thing that struck me was his humility. It was very clear that there was absolutely no ego in that man. It was also extremely clear that his years of service and his custodial responsibility that he had for this congregation was held in his mind and heart in the highest esteem. And so I sat before him as a student and listened, as I recognized immediately that to sit with him, the time that I had was precious. Because what he would be able to share with me, say to me, what he chose to be able to give over to me was going to be extremely important for me to know as I was coming into this position, which was and is the great honor of my life to serve. And he spoke about the community. He spoke about the history of the community and where it was that he saw it now. He spoke very candidly. He did not mince his words. He was a man of truth and clarity, as has been mentioned. He also had another aspect to him, a word that we use in Hebrew called hen. And hen is just grace. Something special, and we could all hear it in his voice. There's something just simply beautiful about his voice. Because in his reading of the prayers here, and as is said in his reading of the Torah, that I also had the merit of hearing him on several occasions, there is this simple honor that he gave to it always. And there's no question that the way that that happened was because there was no ego. He came here like many of his colleagues at 14 years old. And I know that he was together in this group, although I didn't, this was certainly before my time, and I didn't have a lot of time with Rabbi Yossi. I have thankfully spent in Badel HaChaim a great deal of time with Rabbi Elia. Rabbi Elia was a comrade. Rabbi Huda was Rav Tzvi. And we can hear in Rav Tzvi's words the brotherhood that this class, this unique group of young men had. And in all of the time that I've spent sitting next to Rabbi Elia, listening to many, many, many stories of what it was like to be part of that Montefiore College and to be at Druze College and to learn from Rabinovich and to be in that place, in that world, in that era. There are many things that I learned from that, but one very clear point that I've taken from it is these boys were so young. Imagine leaving not just home to go to another city, but to go to another country with another language. 14 years old. The bravery and courage that required. And that in all of that sacrifice, and I will call it sacrifice because I believe it is, for a 14-year-old boy to leave home, and for all intents and purposes, yes, there were visits, but for all intents and purposes, not to go back. 14 years old is no small sacrifice. And from that point, from that time, they dedicated their lives, as did Rav Yossi, to shepherding, the flock, service. And Rav Yossi, along with his comrades, along with his colleagues, did so, I believe, without ego. And that, perhaps you will agree with me, is sadly a rarer and rarer breed. And as we mourn and recognize and honor his life and his contribution, we also recognize and honor that cohort. We honor that cohort. That level of service in which life cycle events, how many bar mitzvahs, as Susan said, how many parashurot, how many haftarot, how many burials, how many weddings, how many lives and how many points in life was he invited to share in, to guide us in, to lead us in, to serve us in. And he did it with his whole heart. In one way or another, for over 40 years. It's remarkable. It's actually staggering, really, when we think about it. If we pause just to kind of digest that, to absorb that. what that means to live such a life. And he did it. And he did it with gladness and happiness and chen and beauty. And we, as a community, and I say this as a senior rabbi, even coming towards the end of his tenure, we as a community are exponentially richer because of it. And it is important for us to pause and to acknowledge that, and to thank him with all of our hearts for his heart that he gave us. May his zechut, his merit, may his teachings, and may his way stand for us and for his family, and all that he holds and held dear. And may we remember the way. And we remember the way that he did. And encourage it. And may his memory, please God, be a blessing for us all in his family. Amen.
So our penultimate recording is what I consider one of the crown jewels in our collection. And it's again from High Holy Day services. Again, all the recording is available for more to hear it. Next, I'll call on Yossi's successor here at Wembley. My father, who was lost by my father when he started.
Shoot, Rabbi Berger, Senior Rabbi Ray, Toledano, Reverend Musi, Wembley family. The word Ronnie in his speech used a number of times, which is indeed a sense, feeling which we have always when we come back here. What more can be said at the whole afternoon hearing all about Rabbi Yossi? What a special person he was, and the service and leadership which he gave to so many. There's an episode right at the end of the Torah. The end of Parashat Ha'azinu, the penultimate parasha of the Torah. You read it, almost seems as if God, as it were, is taunting Moshe. God tells Moshe, climb up the mountain, go up on it, and see the entire land. You can look at it. You can look at it, but you can't come to it. Yaniv, you mentioned earlier how your father would sometimes joke that he was longer than Moshe Rabbeinu, just over 40 years. But when I read this story and I think of Yossi, I think of the similarities between him and Moshe, because I recall just literally a few days before we heard the terrible, devastating news. Yossi was in constant touch with me, writing letters for the Aliyah process. We had the final letter approved and it was all ready to go. He had everything ready for Aliyah. He saw the land, the promised land. He was ready to go into it. Unfortunately, he didn't get that merit, that privilege of being able to fulfill the dream of his life. And like Rabbi Tzvi said, it's difficult when you think about it. It's very hard to stomach. A person who dedicated so much to the community, to shepherding this Kahal Kadosh for so many years, got to see the land but never actually got to live it. There are a few points I would like to mention about Rabbi Yossi. Some of them have been mentioned, which stood out for me. There's a phrase which Moshe uses about HaKadosh Baruch Hu twice in the Torah. Once in this week's parasha and once again in a few weeks' time. That is, he calls God Elohei HaRuchot L'chol Basar. God is the God of spirits of all flesh. And later on, when Moshe is, as all good leaders do, think of a successor, Moshe tells God, I want someone who can be Elohei HaRuchot,
appoint someone, you God of spirits, appoint someone who is able, just like you created every single human being with their diversities and their nuances and their differences. We need a leader who will be able to be a leader of Ruchot, a leader of all the different characters and all the different spirits. And being a community leader, you know, you need to be a person who can deal with all the different Ruchot, all the different characters, all the different spirits, all the different diversities. And that's something which stood out for me from Rabbi Yossi. How he was able, as I mentioned, Susan, I think mentioned earlier on, how approachable he was. A person who was liked by so many people. I never heard a bad word about Yossi in my 7 years here. People only spoke highly of Yossi. Secondly, we heard Rabbi Musi describing Yossi as an Eitz, and Talayana talked about ascending the mountain of Hashem. David HaMelech talks about entering the tent of the Almighty. So Yossi's climbed the mountain, sees the land, he's a tree, and he also entered the tent of the Almighty. David HaMelech says in Psalm 16, who will sojourn, who will dwell in your tent? And King David says, person who speaks truth in his heart. The way he portrays himself is what he feels about you inside. This was something which I really felt about Rabbi Yossi, as Rabbi said earlier on, his candidness. He was very blunt and to the point. No, as our Hachamim call it, had b'peh had b'lev, he would project something different to who he really was. What you saw is what you got, Rabbi Yossi. The truth was in his heart, and that was portrayed out. In his pursuit of truth. But perhaps most importantly, for me at least, like you mentioned, I was a successful, and yes, indeed I was a successful. And you hear sometimes of community rabbis who take on new communities, and it can be difficult shaking off the shackles of the previous leader. Because they're always judged, and they're always maybe getting advice from the previous leader. This do, this you shouldn't do, this is good, this is bad. I promise you, never once Yossi told me do this or don't do that. I called him many times and I asked him advice on things, and I sought his counsel. But never did he say, you shouldn't do this, you should do that. He didn't interfere. He gave advice when he was asked for, as our Hachamim say. He gave advice when he asked for it. He didn't put his nose into things which wanted. He recognized he had served his 40 plus years and appointed the next person. And so these are the memories which we have of Rabbi Yossi, very dear ones. We miss him terribly. He was such a humble person, such an honest person, such a kind person, and a person who we miss tremendously, but who contributed so much to our Wembley family. Take the opportunity to wish Hayyim to Dean, Gabrielle, Natalie, and Yaniv, entire community, Tinish Matod, Surutava Hayyim, may his memory be for blessing. Amen.
So that's for the final part of the service. So you mentioned last week, Yossi's father wrote a book in about 2003, and we've been reading it since Yossi's passing. And Rabbi Berg has been a few.
In this week's parasha, which is Korach, first of all, please let me thank Jack and the committee that organized today's event. I'm not sure that you realize how much effort went in behind the scenes. and a lot of thanks and appreciation from us for a service that I know the Spanish and Portuguese community in particular have been wanting to hold for a while. And I hope that this will also catalyze a program that we've talked about and that we'd like to see actualized, which is to convert the recordings that we have of Yossi's singing to an online archive. The book that I'm sharing from is called Rechev Yisrael. It means the chariot of Israel. The first letters, Resh, Chaf, and Bet, are an acronym for Rabbi Kamios Ben Zion Guri. And I understand that this is a project that Yossi dedicated quite a lot of time to. And it is a tribute to, I guess, the long history of rabbinic leaders that were in his family. So in this week's parasha, Korach, the fourth pasuk, talks about Moshe's response when Korach and his followers rebelled against Moshe's leadership. It says, "Vayishma Moshe vayipol al panav." Moshe heard their voice and he fell upon his face. And the implication is that he lost his mantle of leadership. And the style of Rabbi Kamios Ben Zion Guri is slightly different than what you would expect. He talks about a topic, then he adds a little bit more information, then he digresses a little bit and returns to the topic. So this topic is about the pain of machloket, right? How one who is in a leadership position, and then also within communities, I think this can be equally applied, the pain that results from people who should be working together fighting instead. And so he brings the example, he says, of the hammer that strikes the anvil. And if a brass hammer strikes an anvil, it makes a loud sound. But if it strikes a piece of gold, the sound doesn't resonate as much. And the explanation given as to why that difference is because there is no comparison between two brothers who are fighting against each other as there is when two strangers have a conflict. And therefore he explained that Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the leader of the 12 tribes, would have expected, if nothing else, the family of his own tribe. Korach was from the tribe of Levi. He would have expected them to give him support. And therefore, when they took away their support and challenged his leadership, it caused all the more hurt. And then he draws the example of Abraham Avinu and Lot, where when they grew to the size that they were both well-to-do, their shepherds started to argue with each other. And the verse says that Abraham came to Lot and explained to him, Al na tehi meribah beini u'beinecha. Let there not be a conflict between you and I. If you wish, the land in front of us is vast. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. And if you go to the right, I'll go to the left. Ki anashim achim anachnu, because we are brothers. Achim, Davka, he says, Shahari ko'elet me'od meribah shel kerodim. Because the strife between those who are related hurts more than those who are not. And then he draws an example of the story of the jealousy of Yosef, which led to Joseph being sold into slavery and the Jewish people being descending into slavery in Egypt. And he at first tries to justify the response of the brothers to Joseph because he thinks out loud that it is possible that his brothers were concerned that Joseph speaking badly about them to his father, which is what we understand he did, would possibly cause Jacob to disinherit some of the children, just as Abraham disinherited Ishmael and Isaac disinherited Esau. And so they felt that it was a time of threat, and they responded with a response that led to the sale of Joseph to a caravan that eventually took him into Egypt. And then he goes on to say, Lo matzah HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael kali machazit bracha ela hashalom. So what is the antidote to this kind of internal strife and jealousy? There is no vessel that can hold the blessings of the Almighty greater than the vessel of peace. And he gives an example. He says, there's no comparison between having one stick and having a group of sticks. If you want to break one stick at a time, you can do that very easily. But when people are united together, it makes it much harder to cause them harm. And then finally, he uses that for the purpose of, I guess, encouraging or charging his audience with the responsibility of teshuvah. He says that, in particular, Aleinu lachzor b'teshuvah u'letarken et ma'asenu u'beprat me'inyan lashon hara u'beprat im anashim shemolichim u'meviim ad sheba'avonot haragim al yedei divreihem mafridim ben ish li'ishto u'bein ha'achim u'bein ha'banim. That there's nothing more important than stopping this process, this habit, this custom of people trading in gossip and being envious of each other to the point that it causes a separation between husband and wife and between brothers, between parents and children. Lashon hara, he says, is like shooting an arrow. Once you've let go of the bow, it is almost impossible to recall it. And then he says that Lashon hara might even be considered greater than idolatrous practice, than avodah zarah. Because he says from avodah zarah, a person can do teshuvah. But once one has spoken Lashon hara, it is almost impossible to repair the harm that is done by words that have gone out and affected many people. And so he says we should rededicate ourselves lihishtadel behavat hashalom in order to create peace. Kihu yisod kiyamenu bigalut hazeh, because peace is the foundation for our survival in our exile. And he closes with a comparison to Aaron HaKohen and says, why did the people of Bnei Israel, why did they mourn Aaron for 30 days? It is because he was known for being a person who loved peace, who sought out peace.
The final recording is particularly poignant for me, for my bar mitzvah. And as you know, here at the S&P, there's 3 parshas where we read special to you. One is the 10 Commandments, one is the kids of Moses. Then following me, my bar mitzvah, Mishpatim. The last verse is in that same tune. And I'm going to take it.
ואל משה אמר אל אתה ואהרון רבינו וניגש משה לבדו אל פני והם לא ייגשו והעם לא יעלו עמו ויבוא משה חייל משה אל הר האלוהים ואל הסגלים אמר שגורנו בזה עד אשר נשוב עליכם והנה אהרון וחור עמכם מבעל דברים ייגש עליהם ויעל משה אל ההר וירץ הענן את ההר וישכון כמותניים על הר סיני ויחצהו הענן ששת ימים ויקרא אל משה ביום השביעי מתוך הענן ומראה כבוד אדוני כאש אוכלת בראש ההר לעיני בני ישראל ויבוא משה בתוך הענן ויעל אל ההר ויהי משה בהר ארבעים יום וארבעים לילה.
Finish off. So our custom here we read the Shivah Psalm from Psalm 119, forming the prostate of the deceased's name. So you'll see 4 letters. First, I'd like to put on Samuel, to good.
ידיך יעשוני ויכוננוני, הבינני ואלוהים בדעם מצוותיך, יראיך יראוני וישמחו, כי לדברך ייחלתי, ידעתי אדוני כי צדק משפטיך ואמונה ימיתני, יהי נחס בך לנחמני, כי אמרתך לעבדיך, יבואוני רחמך ואחיה, כי תורתך שעשועי, לבושו זדים כי שקר יביטוני, אני אסיר בפיקודיך, ושובי לי יראיך ויראה עדתך, יהי לי בתמים בחוקיך למען לא אבוש.
From page 130, 4th paragraph. Vivokuni hasadecha Adonai, eshuatecha kimratecha, e'einei horefi davar, nimatati bidvarecha ve'atatzel, nipi devar emet meot, ולמשפטיך החלתי, שמירת תורה לך תמיד לעולם ועד, ואתחל לך ברחבה, כי בכבודך דרשתי, ואתה ועדותיך נגד מלכים ולא אבוש, אשתעשע במצוותיך אשר אהבתי, בסך אפי, אל מצוותיך אשר אהבתי ואשיחה בחוקיך.
סעיפים שנאתי, בתורתך אהבתי, סדרי מחניית, על דבריך ייחלתי, שאו ממני מרעי, ועשר המצוות אלוהי, שמחני תורתך ואחיה, אל תביא שם ספרי, צעדי יבשע, ושעה בחוקיך תמיד, צדית כל שומרים בחוקיך, שקר תרמיתם, סידים השבתת כל רשעי הארץ, לכן אהבתי עדותיך, שמר פחדך, בשריפותיך יראתי.
Yud, page 131. ידיך עשוני ויכוננוני, אבינר בדם מצוותיך, ידיך יהוני ויצמחו, כי בדבריך ייחלתי, ידעתי אדוני בצדק משפטיך, אמונה עניתני, עהדך ותחמני, כי אמרתך לעבדך, יבואני לחמך ואחיה, כי תורתך שעשוע יבושו זני, כי שקר עבדוני, אני אסיע בפקומך, ישובו יראיך, עדותיך עיני בי תמים בחוקיך, למען לא אדיעות. פרתם לשב יושיעם כי חסו בו.
מראתך אשר אנת יראך, אל תחוסים בה נגד בני אדם, מה יקר חסדך אלוהים, וצל קנאתך יחל ציון, ירבו מידי שבטיך, ונחלת עליך תשכן, טוב שם ישמעאל טוב, ביום המוות מו יוולדו, סוד דבר הכל נשמע את אלוהים ירא, ואת מצוותיו שמות כי זה כל האדם. יעלזו חסידים בכבוד, ירננו על משכבותם, מלוכה נכונה לשיבה עליונה, תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלת קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים, וקיבוץ עצמים וכפרת אשמים, והרחקת פשע, והקרבת פשע, חמלת חנינה מפשע מעונה, וכולה כתבה, לחיי העולם הפעם, שם תאמנת מצד ישיבת נפש השם הטוב. היה שיש הרב יוסי בן רבי כמוס, הורי רוח ארוני, תלחם וגן עדן, נתפתר מן המעדן כאות אל המר שמיה והרע, המלך ברחמה ויחוס ויחמל עליו, ילווה אליו השלום, ועל משכבו יהיה שלום, כדכתיב יבוא שלום ינפע, משכבו תמולת נפוחו, ובכל ישראל שוכבים עמו, על הרחמים והסליחות, וכן יהי רצון ונאמר אמן, ולמוות לנצח, מחל אדוני נימה מעל כל פנים, וחרפת עמו יסיר מעל כל הארץ, כי אדוני דיבר, תמונתך נעבר יקומון, הקיצו גררים ושוכני עפר, כי תלורות עליך, בארץ רפאים תפיל, וירחם יכפר עוון ולא ישחית, וליבה להשיב אפו ולא יעלה כל חמתו. וכי איש אשר ימות תנחמנו, כן אנוכי אנחמכם. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ועלמא ירח ירותי וינמיך מלכותי ויצמח פרטני ויקרים בשמי, היכול ונכון חיי לכל בית ישראל. Mangala Visman Karibi Amen. Yalam Almeha Maya Yukaraf Shatafi Pahari Umami Tase Ni Adari Alevi Alam Shemeh Shamerikum Ela Mukul Bekata Shirata Kushbekata Minekamata Lamiram Be'alma Amen. شلامار دام يشمل يا حبيب السماء بشمال السماء بشذرات السماء وكلام شيخ الفقراء بريء رحمة الصلاة لأنش وعنو إسرائيل دين وامين شلام الرماد وبرحمة بيعصي شلام عليكم لأنو إسرائيل دين وامين تقولي مشملتو تسرورا بسرورا حيين آمين.
So we've reached the end. We have a few words. So Dean Natalie, who's in Israel, hopefully will be able to watch the recording of this event, to Yaniv, Gabrielle, and the whole family. We've heard this afternoon at this very moving memorial service how loved Yossi was as a husband, father, grandfather, but also the terrible loss to our community of a cherished friend, leader, a wonderfully talented Hazan, but above all else, a modest and genuine person who was with us through both happy moments as well as some sad moments. The legacy that Yossi leaves behind is a good name and an imprint on so many lives that still lives on, as the wonderful teachings and recordings we have continue to be used. I remember the morning of Sunday, 28th of November 2021, as if it was only today, walking into Lauderdale Road for Shacharit service. One of the regular members came up to me and said that Rabbi Elia would not be attending, as he was busy organising the funeral of the minister at Wembley. Completely taken aback, I inquired who he was talking about, and he said Yossi. I was completely shocked. I had only seen Yossi a few weeks before and talked on the phone to him the previous week. A few minutes later, a number of members of the congregation walked in and inquired whether I had heard about Yossi's passing. The morning service passed in a complete haze, and then I knew I had the difficult task of relaying the news both to our family and our congregation here at Wembley. We were due to have our annual Hanukkah party a few hours later to celebrate the first night of Hanukkah. I knew I had to get a message sent out before then. I asked for the news to be sent out on our synagogue WhatsApp group and by email. As it happened, we decided to come together and light the Hanukkah. And then as a congregation, we remembered Yossi and told stories of the effect Yossi had on our lives. For me personally, as well as the recordings Yossi made, he left helpful guides for nearly every festival. For Pesach, he created a slit to show which pages should be used for the Shabbat of the middle days, as the prayer book itself had a lot of going back and forth. For Rosh Hashanah, he created a page with every single note of the shofar to be blown. As again in the prayer book, it is grouped together, thereby ensuring not a note would be missed when called out to the person blowing the shofar. Finally, for Sukkot, he wrote out detailed notes, noting for every single word, not only in which direction the lulav would be to be shook, but also which direction we should be facing in reference to the Torah position. Again, I've got these if anyone wants to see it, useful. Finally, a few thank yous. Firstly, to the entire Wembley committee and congregation, as well as our wonderful, generous donors who provided us with full financial support on such a fitting tribute to Yossi. To Ronnie Sabah, Gina DeSmith and Sonia Sassoon, who came together with myself to put together this event, providing incredibly useful advice and help. To Diana for her help with organising the event, the Ladies Guild who have put together all the food, and to all the efforts put in by John and helps with the admin side that such an event requires. As well as being here today on Sunday, to help us set up for the event. Also, thank you to God for the recording expertise. Last but not least, a big thank you to everyone who took part in the service and for all the wonderful stories shared today. On behalf of our congregation, I wish all of Yossi's family many more years free from further sorrow, and may Yossi's memory continue to be a source of inspiration in all your lives. That concludes the service. There is food downstairs.
Almost got that. Other end of school. It's different. Oh, yeah, it's definitely different. Yeah, I think it's